Welcome to the HuggCast podcast, a life with drums and drumming. I am your host, Angus McCurrach, and you're very welcome. And now, let the drumming begin. Yes, it's the HuggCast podcast, your rhythmic respite from reality. Fun with drums, including
Drumming joke of the week.
The anagram, drumagram.
and drums for life, well-being and drumming.
And now, here is your host from the Shadio. It's himself.
Yes, it's myself, and welcome to episode 7 of the HuggCast. And it's amazing to have you here. If you haven't heard this before, you are in for a treat. And if you have heard it before, well, it's probably the same rubbish as usual, but you know what I mean. It depends on your taste. But anyway, another fantastic episode. We've got part 2 of our conversation with an interesting person. That's Ewan MacKay, the well-known Northeast composer. And he's got some amazing things to tell us about his journey into composing. We've also got drumming joke of the week. And a few other things thrown in there as well. But you're all very welcome. Relax, sit back. We're going to start off with a wee rant. Just a wee drummer's rant. Drummer's rant. Picture the scene. You've gone in to a shop. You've gone to buy something. And you're not quite sure which one to get. Let's try and think of what could we be buying? We're going to buy a new TV, which is quite complicated these days. There's so many, like 4,000 Ks or 600 caterpillars or how many pixels per square camel, or you know what I mean. It's just used to be a case where you would go into radio rentals and say, I'd like a colour one please, or a black and white one, and then it would take up half the volume of your living room. But anyway, that's to do with cathode rays and stuff. We'll go into that in another podcast. If you want to find all about the history of cathode ray tubes, we'll have a special episode dedicated to that. How's that?
To demonstrate a Crookes tube, a cathode ray tube, we need a high voltage power source, such as this one. We need the Crookes tube, which has a metal cathode, a metal anode, a screen that has been coated with a phosphorescent material that gives off light when struck by electrons, and a bar magnet. As we turn on the screen, we notice that electrons are emitted from the cathode, and as they strike the fluorescent screen, we're able to see the cathode ray, this stream of electrons illuminated. We can use a magnet to show the deflection of that stream.
Here we can see the electrons being deflected by the magnet. The cathode ray moves upward. If we reverse the magnet, we would predict that the beam would be deflected in the opposite direction. And we observe that the beam is deflected downward.
Anyway, so you're going into a shop and you're going to buy a TV. So you've wandered around, there's quite a few on display, and you've decided, I'm going to have that one. That's the one I want. Fits all my specifications. It'll do nicely against the wall, and I think it'll do what I need it to do. But just allow me to watch TV and other things, of course, these days. So you go up to the man at the counter and you say, hello, I would like to buy that TV over there. What a magnificent choice, sir, he says. You obviously have, a knowledge about televisions, because you have chosen the same one that I have at home. Well, if I had a penny for every time a salesman said that to me, I wouldn't be sitting here. Anyway, so I know that's a TV I want. I don't need it to be sold to me, so I say, right, I'll have the TV. Certainly, sir, I'll just take some details, and then the phone rings. The phone that's sitting right beside him and his computer on the other side of the counter. And he answers it. Now, I'm in mid-flow. I'm halfway through my sentence. Well, actually, the reason I've decided to buy that TV is because... And everything freezes. Because he has to answer the phone. Now, there I am, in mid-flow, and suddenly cut off in my prime, so that he can answer the phone. Now, that really irritates me. Here am I. This TV is probably going to cost me, by the time I've negotiated, at least a couple £100, say, £200. £200 is a lot of money. It's a big purchase. I'm halfway through the negotiations, halfway through the transaction. The phone rings, and he answers it. Now, that ringing signifies many things. The obvious thing it signifies is there's somebody at the end of the telephone line, or possibly via satellite, at the end of some kind of digital superhighway. There's somebody at the end who's got some kind of reason to phone the shop, or maybe not. It could be a wrong number. Anyway, I have no idea who is on the end of the phone. More to the point, neither does this salesman. That's the first signal. The phone rings, it means there's somebody trying to communicate with you. The second thing that it means to me is that this person, this anonymous person, this hitherto unidentified person with any nature of inquiry, we've no idea what they want, if indeed it is the correct number that they've dialed. Whoever it is, whatever it is they want, is more important to this salesman than me, who's already committed to buying a television. That really annoys me. It irritates me. There's even been times, and I think it was maybe in Boots the Chemist many years ago, when I'm standing there about to purchase whatever it was I was purchasing, and the woman behind the counter hears the phone ringing and says, "Do you mind if I answered that?" Now, that's actually okay. I think in the sort of page 3 of the Book of Etiquette and How to Deal with Customers, asking permission to answer the phone is probably quite a good way of approaching it. But I said, yes, actually, I do. You're serving me. I've got other things to do. We're halfway through this transaction. I'd rather we finish it, and I'll be on my way. Good day to you, madam. But no, even when I said, yes, I do mind, she still answered the phone, giggling at the same time. Because she didn't expect that answer. Now, here it is. This is the summation, the distillation, the core, the focus of my rant is this. If someone is in the middle of looking after me, we formed a relationship. Now, it's a brief relationship. It's a relationship built on financial trust. It's built upon an understanding that we have both reached an agreement about how we're going to finish this deal. It will involve me passing over money, and it will involve them passing whatever product, goods or thing it is that I wish to purchase. So, yes, the distillation of this rant is this. Please, if you're interacting with someone and you're disturbed by the ringing of a phone, ignore it. They can ring back, they can leave a message, they can send a text. The person standing in front of you who's already committed, he's already committed to you in whatever form that might be, needs your attention. Not some twat halfway across the road who's probably got the wrong number.
Drummer's rant. Well, that was the wee rant. I hope you enjoyed that. We're now going to carry on the show with our second part of the interview with Ewan MacKay, composer from the northeast of Scotland. And, well, there's a few eye-openers in here, such as Ewan doesn't actually like composing. What's all that about? Well, have a listen and you'll find out. And remember, you can get all the information you need about Ewan and his projects at www.ewanmackay.co.uk.
HuggCast interview with an interesting person.
There are certain genres of Scottish music that I've always hated. You know, like I just don't like the Jimmy Shand and his accordions and
Yeah, that kind of shortbread tin.
yes,
Yeah.
but there's obviously a lot more to Scottish music than that. And
Absolutely.
how would you say you've been influenced by Scottish music and the way you compose?
Yeah, to an extent. You know, traditional music, I was a lot like you. You know, as you say, the Jimmy Shand, you know, that, as I say, that kind of very Scottish brand of traditional music. And when I went up to the University of the Highlands and Islands, that really was predominantly a traditional-based performance uni. And it really opened my eyes. I came away just with a completely new perspective and respect for traditional music in this country. And it has obviously kind of fed itself into the sort of the music that I create, but in a very kind of background way.
Almost by osmosis. Makes its way into your. I absolutely get that. Yeah, and what about the environment you live in? Because we live very close together. You know, we're right by the sea, the North Sea. Has that influenced the way that you create?
All of my work is about the landscape to some extent. You know, all of it. It's what I'm about in terms of the inspiration. You know, and I live in a beautiful part of the world, and you know that. And I think how can you not be influenced by where we are? Sure. And I think the northeast of Scotland is a massive impact on my music. So if that's kind of just like the sea or the cliffs and, you know, the seascapes and, you know, just the landscape and the topography of it, you know, so like long big fields and just nothingness, you know, that might manifest itself in, you know, most of the time really slow music, you know, but it's a huge inspiration. And spending more time with my partner in Aberdeen, in a city, that's interesting because it's a bit more hustly and bustly, more people, cars, just bigger. And, you know, Aberdeen's not a huge city by any means. It's really quite small. But, you know, it's just interesting for me how that process kind of changes, because I need time to think and, you know, kind of pray, meditate, think on what the music is and what it's going to become. So doing that in a big, kind of more busy environment can, at times, it's quite challenging. It's just interesting how landscape or environment, you know, plays a role in the work that people create, and that's where the master's degree was really eye-opening as well, because it was kind of drawing on these influences of space, place, and people and culture.
So that then brings another question in my head, which I've never thought about before. So a composer, let's say it was Mozart. So Mozart's composed, I don't know. Well, let's think about Beethoven, because I know more about him. So he's composed his ninth symphony. Am I right in thinking that he wouldn't then sit down and write out all the parts for? Was that like everyone in the orchestra's got to have their score?
Yeah.
Were there people whose job it was to interpret the great master,
So
manuscript?
What Beethoven would do would be play the piano, and he would then start to kind of write out the score. So flute, oboe, whatever the kind of instruments are, and then he would write the full score, which wouldn't have been, which isn't a kind of it's no mean feat. It's a huge thing to do, especially with like the Ninth Symphony when you're deaf as well. Must have been a role, but Beethoven was a real genius, so he had that going for him. And then what would have happened is the music would have gone to like a copyist. So Beethoven's scribbly scroll, he would often scrub parts out, so violently that you would rip the paper. And he'd cross a bar out and he'd go, "That's not what I want. This is how it's going to be." So it would be a real mess. The score isn't something that's beautifully written out. Difficult to read handwriting for a start. And he's writing so quickly and so furiously. So that then had to go to a copyist whose job it was to actually look at that score and go, right, and write it in neatly and properly for all the players to have their own. So, 2 violins to a desk, so they're playing off one, and huge work. It would have been an awful lot of work back in the day.
Wow.
But nowadays, with technology, you can just typeset these things ridiculously quickly. I'm quite slow at typesetting music. There are people who are ridiculously quick, at playing it on the piano or at typing it in, and it's crazy how fast some people are.
Do you ever sort of wake up in the middle of the night and go, "Oh, I'll get this down," and you sit at the keyboard and before you forget it?
I did it the other night.
Did you?
Actually, I had a chord in my head. I often find, like, when it does happen, though, if I wake up in the middle of the night or, I'm just, like, doing something completely boring, like, having a cup of tea, I'm not doing anything musical or creative at all, and I'll have, like, a melody or an idea, those are the pieces that actually turn out all right. Don't enjoy writing music, but, like, I enjoy the process of it being performed or, recorded and listened to, like, the final product.
But you were also saying there that you don't enjoy composing.
I don't. No.
So why? I mean, I know you teach as well.
Yeah.
So would you see yourself moving away from composing and focusing? No.
I think it's a strange. I love it. I really do love compose. Like it. I want to be clear. Like, I love composing, but the actual process of getting from initial idea to finished piece is kind of like creative labor. It's not easy.
That's the hard work.
For some people it is, but for me it's not. And I don't make any, I don't pretend to people that I'm not like some kind of real genius that's able to just sit down and do it, I don't really enjoy it in terms of the actual compositional process, but the point of getting to a finished piece is amazing when you hear it.
How do you know when you've got to the finished piece?
I think you just kind of, when you're working on it, at least when I'm sort of working on it, sometimes it's like it's like building a house, I suppose, and you just build this thing and it's really big and unwieldy, and completely unpractical, and then you sort of pare it back and pare it back, and then you kind of get to a point where you're like, you listen to it, or you know whatever, and you're like, well, that's what I want to show, or that's what I want to say, and you're kind of finished. I guess other composers, composition is a really subjective thing, because every composer you ask any question to, just about, when it comes to this kind of philosophical points around music, they'll all have different answers.
Yeah.
There's no one answer really.
No, I just wondered if have you ever heard the finished piece that you've written and thought, oh God, I wish I'd
Yeah.
not done that or not done this.
All the time, constantly. No, I think it was Mendelssohn that said that he wrote his next piece because he wasn't satisfied with the one that came before.
Okay.
And that's totally what I'm like. I'm always listening to pieces and thinking, oh God, I wish I'd done that differently, or you know. But
maybe had some more. Maybe needed more drums in this bit.
Yeah, a little bit more cowbell. But I think as I've kind of like developed, I don't really get nervous as much now when I hear music done, I just think like people are gonna think what people are gonna think. You know, I did my first orchestral piece that I wrote in college when I studied at the North East Scotland College. I studied with Paul Tierney, who was a really fantastic teacher and mentor, and he wrote atonal music, and he kind of really showed me that that what atonal. I hated it. When I was in school, I was like, oh, if it's not like Beethoven and completely tonal and like absolutely, it's not worth it. But he really opened my eyes to sort of atonal music, and so I wrote this piece for orchestra called Gate, and it was sort of about just like life, and it sounds really pretentious, especially when you're kind of like 19 years old and you write something about that when you've got no life experience. But I was standing in the foyer after the piece got performed, and I approached this woman approached me, and I said, did you enjoy it? And she went, no, love, I didn't. Just completely honest, and I was like, thanks for your honesty.
And dagger to the heart.
Yeah, and I think when you're kind of like younger, you take these things to heart. But now I'm kind of like, people are just going to like it or they're not going to like it, and you can't change what people are going to think. But I always think if I had if I was fortunate, maybe not through COVID and maybe not for a long time yet, but if you had 100 people listening to a piece, I'd want 100 different interpretations. And I want people to kind of think differently about it. I used to do that a lot when I used to write music, at university, and have my tutors and lecturers look over it, and we would discuss it. I wanted to leave that room with a piece that was gonna, tear their opinions apart.
Yeah, fantastic. And I was actually just thinking when you were talking there about that there's a freedom, maybe a freedom there that, the likes of Beethoven and Mozart and, many of these composers, I guess the further back you go, the more this is, that it was the people with money that were able to pay for things to be written, and the people from money tended to be from, royalty, or it could be the church, or
Absolutely, yeah.
and that must have had a huge influence on what was written. Whereas now you can just do what you like, really, can't you?
Yeah, but the kind of it's a really interesting point you've just made, because Bach, for example, was employed by patrons and the church, and he had to write his his oratorio or whatever he had to do it, his cantatas, and he had every Sunday he had to do them. And
and presumably be mindful of what people would like.
Yes, yeah.
If they didn't like it, they would get somebody else.
The thing that's important is that nobody ever clapped for that music.
Mm-hmm.
It was music that was defined by the sort of culture of its time, and nobody ever clapped for that music.
That's
what I think that he did it because he had to do it, and he made a living, and then it was discovered many years later, and he's now known the world over. But at his time he was obscure. It was Handel that was the more well known and better regarded composer, but they were living from Aberdeen to Dundee was about the distance apart, roughly, and it was Bach was kind of just not known, and it was Handel. But today, you've got the freedom, but you don't have the security. We don't really have wealthy patrons that pay for us to sit and write music. We don't have that, and everybody wants to do it.
And keeping an orchestra going, just on the road, if you like, to keep it ticking over, it's extremely expensive. You've got all these people that need to earn a living.
I always think that's we don't have. I mean, we do in a sense, because you can crowdfund and Patreon where people can contribute to what you do, and but the security is not there today.
Yeah,
and it's the 1% of people. It's like football or it's sports, or it's a tiny fraction of people who are that make it.
One of the cultural references for me and most people in the Western world anyway these days is film and TV. We all watch TV, we all watch films, and I suppose if we're thinking about music, that's bound to have an influence, that people relate to that in a way that in the 19th century there wasn't any TV or film, but there was still orchestras and theatres, and there was still, even when the silent movies came along, you had the pianist or the organist playing along to what was on the screen. Yeah,
I think there's always been that connection. I think to film and music, and it's definitely an interesting one, because it doesn't seem like you will have people who will write strictly to film, but as I've said, you'll often have music that's then synced or put to that film that wasn't originally intended for it. So I'm absolutely terrible at watching horror films or scary films. I jump all the time. I'm terrible at it. Claire always laughs at me. I'm dreadful. Someone opens a door or whatever it is in the cinema, and I'm through the roof. And I think so much of it is not down to the scene itself. If you think of Jaws, for example, Jaws is just a kind of big shark. It becomes absolutely terrifying in the music that John Williams wrote.
Yes,
or in like
absolutely.
horror films where it's like just suspended kind of violin chords, or like harmonics, or like however it might be. If you take the music away,
Yeah.
it's not actually scary at all. Music gives the life and the context and the happiness and the joy or the complete sheer terror to a scene in a film. Without the music's absolutely pivotal. It's why it's like the last thing to go on to film.
But I wonder whether, because I'm thinking of the shower scene in Psycho,
Yeah,
that's the famous scene where you never see the knife going in, but the music is just, it's almost like the music is representing a each stab, and you
yeah,
can feel it. And I wonder whether the likes of Alfred Hitchcock, he probably did have something in the back of his mind about what music's going to go on top of this.
absolutely. Yeah.
The real great directors, I think, probably always had, that going on as well as all the other stuff that directors have to do.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a bit more about your teaching, because you're teaching in, is it Kemney?
Yeah, in a little music school called the Rhythm Box.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, I say it like I'm teaching, like I'm actually mostly doing a lot of the kind of marketing and sort of business development and strategy
Yeah.
there, which is quite different. I had a job working for a marketing and events coordination for a really small tech company when I came out of uni. A couple of weeks after I left the master's degree, I was like, well, I have to get a job. So I ended up getting a job there. Didn't like it. It wasn't my industry at all. And I really struggled. But I kind of built up my skills and understanding of marketing and, how to market things. And then got a job, with the Rhythm Box. And it's awesome because it's kind of my field, my industry. I know it, I'm not
What happens at what happens at the Rhythm Box then? Tell me a bit about the Rhythm Box.
First and foremost, a music school. My role in it, is I teach cello to a couple of students there. But we've got piano and drums, guitar, saxophone. It's a music school. But my kind of role is just there to sort of facilitate. My boss and collaborative partner, just to kind of take a bit of time off his hands and let him focus on what it is that he needs to do. He works in the with the school, but he also works in an ASN school as well. So as you can imagine, that gets quite busy and hectic for him. So I'm kind of just in there, just kind of posting to social media and handling the various just different things that go along with the PR and it's been really great. One of the things that we've recently sort of pivoted towards there at the school is a model by which we can still do one-to-one lessons, your 4 or 5 lessons a week, but you can also learn online through our new platform. So we can just reach, there's hundreds of pieces of content on there, video lessons, video guides and tutorials, sheet music, resources, and it will just continue to grow. But we could reach, an oil worker on an oil rig who just has a guitar there on the rig, and he wants to learn how to play guitar, for example, or, because we're in Kemney, which is, further out from Aberdeen, it's, even from Aberdeen to get to Kemney, it's 20 minutes, so it can, not necessarily the most convenient thing. So through COVID, we've been teaching remotely. We're back face to face now, but we really realized that, we can shift the model to a sort of subscription model where we can do face-to-face lessons in the rooms, for example, but we could also do face-to-face lessons online. So I could teach you cello here online through Zoom, or you could learn at your own pace using the video tutorials and whatnot. So it's we've never seen anything quite like it before. There are music subscription services where you can learn, but this is it's a different kind of beast altogether. So that's been a couple of weeks that's been up and running. So we'll see how it goes. But
that's brilliant, and because you and I were talking about this before we started recording, about this idea that COVID has always been a complete nightmare and disaster for for many, many people. But there's actually a silver lining there, that a lot of these tools that we've had to learn, new skills that we've had to, come to grips with, which allow us to communicate with people. I mean, we're doing it now. I mean, although we're not that far away, you could quite easily be in Australia and I could be in,
Absolutely.
Mozambique or whatever.
Clever artists don't starve. You find a way to make it work. It might not be the most reliable. Here's a thought. That certainly as an emerging composer, I'm often thinking about it. I'm sort of realistic in the expectation that this might not work, because it's hard. And I might need to go and get some other job that pays but I feel like if you really enjoy doing what you're doing, you can make it work. So I've just found a fantastic job with a rhythm box, and that's kind of like my job, and I do my composition on the side, and I collaborate with people, and I'm thinking of other ways of building revenue streams and things. It's not an easy way to make a living, but just cut back on your expectations of what life is and that consumerist society nonsense, then you can actually make it work.
To be creative is one of the most important and joyous acts a human being can do. As composers and artists, we strive to find ourselves in our music, and our music in ourselves. By creating, we're creating something from nothing, and we strive to find the music and the meaning in it all. When we make the decision to take the leap towards the creative life, we need the belief that we can and will be successful if we're determined enough. The Sustainable Composer ebook series is my creative manifesto, declaring and sharing my journey to building a creative practice, which is both enriching but also sustainable. We're all on the same journey as composers and creative individuals, with so much to discover and so many creative doors that we can open. If I can build a sustainable creative practice, you can too. Come with me on this journey of creative and self-exploration.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that second part of the interview with Ewan. Thanks again to Ewan for his permission to use his music and the videos, and also to the players, the musicians who took part in all of Ewan's compositions. Now it's time for
Drumming Joke of the Week.
This week's joke takes place in a venue that every band member who there has ever been, whether you were Jimi Hendrix, whether you were Paul McCartney, or whether you were me, you have spent a lot of time in a van. Vans travel up and down the country, they travel all over the world in vans. Back of vans, front of vans, and in some cases, I'm not going to tell you that story. So, I am with my band, The Tribe, and we're in a van. There's space for 3 of us in the front, so we're all sitting together. I am on the passenger side, so I've got the windy seat. I can look out the window and lean my head on it and fall asleep, and I'd quite like the windy side of the van. A beautiful summer's day. We're heading off to Inverness in north of Scotland for a gig up there. And I wind the window down, it's so hot and there's a nice breeze coming in. And I just very casually reach outside the van and I grip hold of the base of the aerial for the radio. We tend to go, sort of VIP class these days. If we hire a van, we get one that's got a radio. So that's just to put you in the picture there. They've usually got seatbelts as well, so that just shows you what kind of act that we are these days. Aerials and seatbelts. So I'm there, I've got my feet up on the dashboard, I'm kind of dozing away, and I've got my hand outstretched through the window, and I'm just holding on to the bottom of the aerial, really just because it makes me feel comfortable. So I'm just there, I'm relaxed, and then all of a sudden, Scully, who's driving the van, makes a sudden turn to the left. Now, it wasn't sudden from the context of him driving. He knew he was turning left. Scotty, who's sitting in the middle, he knew we were turning left. They were following directions. I, however, was kind of semi-dozing, just beginning to nod off. I wasn't expecting a turn to the left. I gripped the base of the aerial so tight because I thought I was going to get thrown out of the van. It was so tight, and we were swinging round the bend, and oh, what pain it was. A pain shot through my hand and up my arm, and I looked down at my hand, and I was scarred. I had a visible wound. Now, there was no blood, but it was very, very painful, and I had a vertical line right down the centre of my hand. Well, as you can imagine, I howled and howled and howled and complained. Anyway, we got to the gig, managed to play despite the painful hand, and the next day I woke up and I looked, and down my hand was this very bright red vertical line where I'd been holding on to the aerial, and I thought, this is not going to get any better. I wrapped a bandage round it, and I went off to see if I could find the local hospital. To me, this was an accident, and to me, it was kind of, well, it was emerging as a situation. So it was an emergency in the strict sense of the word. So I approached the hospital with my hand, and I say, could someone please help me with this? Well, I was taken in to the wee booth. The curtains were drawn by a very, very nice nurse. He said he was going off to get the doctor. So the doctor came, and she looked at it and she went, oh. I said, what's the problem? She says, this is quite a nasty one. I said, well, it feels quite painful, but I didn't realise there was cause to be too concerned. Oh, well, it'll be fine, she says, but we're going to need to give you a course of really strong antibiotics. I said, is it that bad? And she says, well, 30 years of being an emergency doctor, this is the worst case of venereal disease I've ever seen.
Drumming joke of the week.
Well, there you go. That was Drummer's Joke of the Week. I hope you enjoyed it. And just to let you know, in case you're really concerned, I made a full recovery. The penicillin did its trick. But now it's time for this week's Drumagram, or our weekly anagram, based on percussion, drums, drummers, that general theme. But last week's answer was kettle drums. Kettle drums. So if you got that one, give yourself a pat on the back. This week's drumagram is a drummer. Quite a famous drummer, but ironically more famous for not being a drummer, if that makes any sense. Anyway, see if you can get this week's anagram. Here it is. This week's anagram is beep test. Beep test. B-E-E-P-T-E-S-T. Send in the correct answer and you could win a prize. Well, that's it for this week's HuggCast. I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening, And thank you again to Ewan MacKay for part 2 of that fascinating interview with him. But look out next week for more drumming, fun and games. And until then, be safe, take care of yourselves, and bye. The Huggadrum HuggCast is a production by Huggadrum in collaboration with Handpicked Drums and BuchanCounselling.com.